Thank you very much, everybody, for joining the Capita IT Professional Services webinar again. So today we're going to talk about cloud testing, and this webinar will be presented by Michael Evans, Business Development Manager at Capita, supported by Mark Roberts, who will be there at the end of the session to answer your questions. Two pieces of information for you today. Number one, the list of attendees has been hidden for privacy and security reasons. And number two, we have chosen to mute people on entry, so please remain on mute. And if you have questions, of course, there will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end in the chat box. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Michael Evans. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much. In our webinar today, we'll be covering the typical situations that clients tell us about which actually led to the service being developed. We have a client project which will give you a high-level run-through covering how we approach, assure, and deliver in the cloud, covering services like manual, automated, and performance testing. And we'll also let you see the feedback from a client's perspective and go through some of the vast possibilities of how to put cloud testing to good use. Now, I'd firstly say before we continue, a pleasure it is to have such a good-looking audience, and there'll be a slide at the end with contact details for Mark Roberts, so please address any complaints to him. Thank you kindly. So, unfortunately, this sounds all too familiar to everybody we speak to. To give you an idea of how Capita's cloud testing came about in the first place, as a service organization, our customers were always coming up with typical problems and shouting about them. So areas like secure environments are either unavailable or too expensive. There's not enough staff to get the coverage or execute the full volume of tests within the window they have. There's a lack of time to actually complete the test cycle. You may have everything in place, but projects have slipped and you are pressed. The end-user device configurations can be quite an endless list, and you may not have a dedicated mobile lab or just have some basic devices. So today, we're going to highlight the tangible benefits of secure cloud testing. In essence, what we're talking about here is using the right mix of innovative services and techniques to get the best results for any given scenario. So we're going to highlight a real-life example of a situation where there were several challenges and how we were able to use these innovative services in the right way to deal with these challenges most effectively in terms of time, cost, and quality. So to introduce Informa, Informa is one of the world's leading knowledge providers, and they create and publish highly specialized information through numerous channels, providing valuable knowledge to individuals, businesses, and organizations around the world. One of their key products is Sightline. It's Informa's most comprehensive source of real-time R&D intelligence for the pharmaceutical industry, which draws upon data from 30,000 unique sources, and it's used by 19 of the top 20 pharmaceutical companies worldwide. In this instance, Informa were investing in a new data center and infrastructure refresh specifically for its Sightline business. And Capita were chosen as their testing partner because we had experience of using both a secure cloud and private cloud-based approach for relatively similar projects to this one. Some of their challenges in this instance included an infrastructure refresh, meaning moving from the west coast to the east coast of the USA, which is obviously over 3,000 miles away. The specific challenge was to ensure the Sightline website would still function and perform as specified after the migration and rehosting had taken place. So we were engaged to test both the functionality and performance of the application and the environment, which meant replicating a split of traffic across the globe. So for it to be realistic, it had to be 40% from Europe, 40% from the Americas, and 20% from Asia, whilst working remotely from the UK office. So with a mix of having to tailor an end-user test environment to replicate geolocation, test functionality to specified high coverage, and assess performance of both the application and infrastructure, we came up with the following approach and tactical use of innovative services to provide the testing and assurance they were looking for with the right balance of cost, time, and quality for the project. As we would with any engagement, we first established the right level of knowledge and built assets so that we could easily conduct the execution and leave something of value with the client for future use. To give you a high-level overview, we first started with knowledge transfer. We were faced with the fact that there were very few, if any, real assets to work with other than key people. There weren't any existing test scripts to speak of, only a set of user journeys contained really within the brains of key individuals. So this meant we had to firstly engage in knowledge transfer with a set of busy staff. So in order to baseline the existing functionality and create test cases for ongoing regression testing and ensure we had acceptable scope and coverage of testing, we used WebEx sessions to gather this knowledge in the most cost-effective and time-efficient way possible, which minimized disruption to BAU activities and staff. So we undertook knowledge transfer with key and former business representatives. It allowed us to analyze and baseline the website, how it functioned in its existing location, and ensure we knew what testing needed to be taking place for acceptance. And of course, we were able to minimize disruption to BAU by using WebEx. Once we gathered the right level of knowledge, we move on to building assets as you normally would. So the knowledge transfer exercise allowed us to build the right mixture of manual and automated test packs to optimize the test effort and develop a regression pack that could then be reused for future testing by the client. We built the tests using open source tools for the automation so as to avoid licensing or yearly fees for the client. Then at this point, we were able to use WebEx again with informer stakeholders, really to ratify the test that we'd built, making sure our understanding of the website was accurate, ensuring the scope and coverage were correct, and showing the valuable assets that we had already created for them, even before we got to test execution. At execution, at this stage, we were able to execute these tests utilizing our custom secure cloud services to simulate testing from the required locations around the globe. We were able to put the team together based on devices and skills, and we logged defects and provided access to them to view via our portal. This is where we not only used our secure cloud-based infrastructure, but also our private crowd of remote testers around the UK. With over 700 testers in our permanent team and a private crowd of thousands of professional testers at our fingertips, we were able to quickly select the team for the execution, which was large enough to cut down the testing window to just 2 days rather than weeks. And defect reporting was live in our portal so that their developers could fix in their environment before publishing to ours for any retesting. So on to performance. For the performance test, we utilized our cloud environment, again, to simulate load as specified by Informer, splitting by the regions. It allowed us to assess and monitor if there were any significant latency issues between the various countries and the hosted site itself, and of course then compare those statistics to the current baseline production site. So, of course, we were able to give them access to the right skills at the right time for performance testing. And without the use of this key infrastructure and customized cloud solution, testing would have required far larger numbers of resource from across the world to simulate end-user load, which would have added complexity, time, and cost. Also, because we were able to use open source tools and our existing cloud infrastructure, we were able to easily spin up hundreds of virtual users and turn them off when testing was complete. So, looking at the added value that we were able to bring versus an in-house testing function, obviously we baselined their functional testing. We were able to automate a core set of tests for future use, which became client-owned IP. Load injection from our cloud infrastructure was completely tailored, so we were able to do performance testing realistically. We were able to release the strain on an already maxed out business, and we were able to provide access to specialist skills, both performance and automation, at the right time, avoiding any downtime. And of course, doing this through a single supplier, you have a single point of contact that understands the whole project, but is able to conduct the planning, the delivery management, and any issue resolution. Following the project, a lessons learned workshop was held and the key findings were filtered back into future engagements. In essence, we were able to deliver test execution quicker, deliver the different testing phases cheaper, and allow the whole project to be delivered faster without compromising on quality. To give you an overview of some of the key benefits for your organization, they will obviously depend on your individual circumstances, but some of the key repetitive benefits are reducing strain on business users, the fact that it's a pay-as-you-use model, on demand, fully scalable, and quite realistic when it comes to load testing, makes it a very low cost and effective, tailorable solution. To give you a moment to read through the testimonial from our client, I think the summary of what you can take away is that we were chosen because it's an enterprise-level service, there's a track record, global reach, an offshore resourcing option, delivered at a fixed cost, and assures the quality to the end user to maximize return on investment. You can almost treat this as a pick and mix of services tailored to meet your individual needs, breaking down whether you need test scripting as a service to be done or not, which devices you want to use to test with, how many test cycles you might want to run, what type of testing you want us to do, whether just manual functional testing or load testing, or simply just spike test before a peak trading period. In summary, our cloud testing service is flexible, on-demand, cost-effective, and secure, and all forms part of our testing as a service model, which includes hosting, resourcing, consultancy, testing tools, and a output-based test factory model. So some of the possibilities here, the solution is normally selected from a packaged offering, if you like, which would almost provide you with a fixed-term test effort to either validate a product or a service. But in essence, we would help to define and implement the quality assurance regime for that product or service, work with you to decide how, what, and when to test, help you define the organization of the testing team, the roles, responsibilities, help you with test planning and estimation, any tool recommendations based on our experience, obviously provide reporting and monitoring and metrics of the whole service, and work with you to help define success criteria. In essence, if it's short term, it's not a problem. If it's short notice, it's not a problem either. That's what the service was here for. In essence, the service was born to deal with a plethora of different challenges that we, as a trusted service provider, hear about every day. For instance, these are some of the typical situations where this service can be very effective. Either you require a low-cost, short-term, secure cloud-based testing solution without the need for heavy investment on your part into test teams, tools, environments, or processes. You might just want to reduce your test cycle time, have all the assets ready, and just get us to help execute. You may want the option of being able to use your own resources to deliver part or most of the project and us just to bolster the capability. You might very well at short notice want the availability of testing professionals on a very fixed-term basis, which is a very suitable alternative to trying to get contractors in to do this work. Or more often than not, you might want a very unbiased, fresh perspective on your testing from a user acceptance perspective. Or, as we see more often than not, you suddenly need to increase your device coverage because you're getting reports of defects on a device that you haven't tested with previously. Or we hear all too often is another project has slipped and you have to suffer, your time is squeezed. These and many more similar challenges were the fertilizer that allowed innovations such as secure cloud testing to grow. So I'll pass you back to Delphine now. As I mentioned, contact details of Mark Roberts for any complaints. Please don't be shy. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Michael. I do think this was really useful to everyone and that you managed to find some of the answers that you were looking for today. What we're going to do now, so I've got the screen up. We're all set up to take some more questions. We have received one already, so I'll start with some of these. and we may not have time to cover everything, all of your questions, but if we don't, then we will be very happy to take some of your questions on emails, so that's why you've got all the details on the screen at the moment. So the first question is, I don't know Mark or Michael who wants to pick that one up, is how comparable is a cloud environment versus your own data center, our own data center?
Yeah, hi Delphine, it's Mark. I'll take that. Thanks for the question. So when we set up the cloud testing environment, we look to try and replicate as closely as we can, the live environment, albeit some of the components will be hosted in the cloud, obviously, to make it more flexible and to give access to the environment, around the globe for multi-location. So, we place any data sets, securely in our cloud environment and make those accessible as they would be, any normal infrastructure, as you would experience it, say, working inside an organization's network. So from an end user perspective, you will not see any difference as to how that data is accessed. But because it's based in a secure environment and the data is encrypted, there's no risk there of any of that data being kind of accessed or available, externally.
I understand. Thank you, Mark. The second question that just came up from John is, he's asking, how would you test disaster recovery or failover testing?
Sorry, how would we test?
Disaster recovery or failover testing?
Yeah, that's a good question, really. I mean, not every scenario lends itself to a cloud environment, but where we have infrastructure and components of that infrastructure based in the cloud, obviously you want to be able to test the resilience of those components and how they will react in certain situations. Now, where you have a setup inside an internal organization with those components on site, there are certain kind of, I guess, redundancies, resilience there that will be specific to that environment. But when you're testing these things over a cloud, a lot of the time is, how things will recover, how a disaster recovery or a kind of switch over to another environment will automatically pick up and enable you as an end user to continue using the service. So, realistically, it's a case of looking at those components and understanding what we can simulate in the cloud, and then simulating that in such a way as to, replicate how that piece of infrastructure or service will continue to work and recover once, let's say, DR has been instigated. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I hope that makes sense. Thank you very much, Mark. The next question I've got from Lisa is, how do you deal with the third-party dependencies, such as credit scoring or payment gateways, when we have to request and pay for their environment?
Yeah, that's interesting, actually. So what we've done in the past is we've used an element of what we call service virtualization. So where you perhaps have third parties whose service you have to rely on throughout your testing phases, there are ways around this. You can, look to virtualize the service that you call upon. So in the instance of financial institutes where you've got payment engines, you employ the use of a service virtualization tool. And then once you've built that environment, you can then host that in the cloud. So effectively, if you're testing, let's say, in an organizational environment, and you want to make this third-party interface available, once it's been virtualized and placed in the cloud, you can then access it from anywhere potentially. So, when you mix that in with the use of environment virtualization as well, it can be quite powerful to give you multi-environments that you can use and spin up and then tear down, and access from anywhere around the globe. So, combined with cloud and service virtualization, that can be, quite a powerful tool.
And of course, even more cost-effective than having to pay for those third-party environments. If you virtualize them, you can use them as much as you like for a lot less cost than paying third parties per transaction.
Yeah, and that's a very good point, Michael. And one of the other things it does is reduce the kind of downtime that you might have during testing as well. So where you have to wait for environments or the use of third-party interfaces, removes that dependency, and you can have these things available as and when you want. So you can use them for testing earlier in the life cycle and all the way through, without having added costs or delays to your kind of testing process.
Cool, very, very interesting, very detailed. Thank you, Mark. We have a few minutes, so I'll take one more and maybe another one afterwards. David's asking, in the example, we talked about performance testing in the cloud. Can you explain how is it done? So I think we covered that a little bit, but can you give a bit more detail, Mark, if you don't mind?
Yeah, absolutely. In this scenario, and indeed in many scenarios where you would performance test using a cloud environment, what we've essentially done is placed injectors, load injectors, strategically at a number of points around the globe in cloud environments. So I think for this client, we had one based in Europe, one based in Asia, and one based in the US. And that allows us to simulate a large amount of load coming from strategic points around the globe, focusing on a target endpoint. And because the use of a cloud environment is quick, flexible, and cheap, you can set these things up with the use of virtual machines fairly quickly, and then simulate load, targeting at users' end systems from pretty much wherever you want around the globe, depending on what it is you're trying to achieve.
Thank you, Mark. I've got one last question here. Someone mentioning a logo of ISO 20001, I think. Is it a service that we deliver, Michael, or is it certified?
Sorry, yes, the question is, Mark, whether our service is ISO 27001 accredited. I think someone saw the logo, which was on one of the slides.
Yeah, absolutely. It all is. We work to a number of ISO accreditations, and that's been one of the ones that we ensure that all of our services are delivered to. Absolutely, yes.
Cool. Thank you so much. I think we're going to close now. 25 minutes, roughly what we wanted to achieve. So we didn't take too much of your time. Of course, if you have any more questions, Michael and Mark are there to help you. And for them, so please get in touch. And what we'll do, as always, we send the slides via email just after the presentation to all of you. And thank you again for attending. Bye-bye.